Hey, what's up guys, Rev here. So today we have another round of localizer related drama to cover. More issues stemming from the localization of Japanese media into the Western markets, because this is an issue that reflects on the localizers who are abusing their position of trust to add in a bunch of nonsense into their translations. Now we've seen Capcom's localization team throw their hat in the ring yesterday. So for absolutely no reason at all, they have made this very long thread with the goal of sharing what localization is and some of the subtle nuances of providing a localization. Now, of course, in their games, we've seen some issues with localizations into Western markets. So this thread and some of the information contained within it has confirmed a lot of the fears and concerns customers have had about the localization of these Japanese games into Western markets. Now, of course, if you have been concerned about the shoddy localization of anime and manga, you should also be concerned with these shoddy localizations of Japanese video games and Japanese media in general, because these issues are all intertwined. So here we have the start of the thread. They begin by describing what is localization. Embark on a global adventure through the lens of game localization beyond mere translation. We're diving into the art of cultural adaptation, preserving context, and inclusive storytelling. Join us as we unravel the intricacies that make games resonate worldwide. Wow, that was beautiful to read. Unfortunately, a lot of localizers operate on a much more simple level where they just work to inject whatever they want into their stories and see how much they can actually get away with. But continuing on into the thread, it says, not just translating. Localization isn't just about translating words. It's about adapting the game for a global audience. Remember this phrase, global audience. We'll talk more about that in a second. Think of cultural nuances, idioms, and the regional flair. A good localization makes players feel right at home wherever in the world they are. So right here, this thinking of the cultural nuances and how we have to change things. God forbid anyone would be exposed to Japanese culture. Am I right, localizers? It's such a weird thing where they're so obsessed with trying to change and alter anything that resembles Japanese culture. It's a very strange process, but let's focus on this last line. A good localization makes players feel right at home. Guys, I don't know about you, but I don't really care for this. I don't want to feel at home when I'm reading or consuming Japanese media. That's kind of the whole point of me going to a different medium that's a different language and culture. It's something different. I don't want to feel at home, whether it's watching anime or reading manga or playing Japanese video games. Like, what now, Capcom? Like, what are you going to do to make me feel at home as an American? Like, if you have a samurai character, are you going to change him into a cowboy so I feel nice and at home? Like, it's just all kind of ridiculous. But continuing on, we get another very important section here saying the importance of context. Lost in translation? Nah, preserving the vibe is key. Jokes, references, and even gameplay elements might need a little cultural remix. That's a new one, a cultural remix. That's a really funny way of saying cultural vandalism, as these localizers are inclined to do, but they go on to say, it's important to find that sweet spot to make sure players get the intended experience without feeling like something got lost in the process. So we've seen this global audience reference in the previous section, and then in here we get this cultural remix in this sweet spot. Now, unfortunately for Capcom, I don't think they really know what the sweet spot is, because if you go to their website, they talk about their goals of localization. Right here they say Capcom's localization team is involved in game development from the initial stages, and simply translating games developed under Japanese norms can end up hurting users unexpectedly due to historic, religious, or cultural differences. So basically right here, that sweet spot is really far in one direction, where they're basically saying the localization team needs to be involved right at development, or if they're not, these Japanese norms that are in the game might hurt people in other audiences. But then, on the same website, here's another section talking about delivering made in Japan to countries with different languages and cultures, where they say, While localization is an important part of overseas game development, we should avoid trying to completely localize a game. Capcom is a Japanese company, and attempting to make a 100% Western game will only result in creating an imitation of a Western game, which is something I would imagine players and customers would like to hear, but that's a departure from what we just read. Between these two statements and the thread we're reading on Twitter, we have three different conflicting statements on what their goal is with their localizations. Some are very extreme, some are more nuanced, some are in the middle. It's very confusing. But moving on, let's read this bridging the linguistic gap. Each language has its unique structure and cultural context. Our teams work to ensure the narrative and dialogue maintain coherence and emotional impact. It's not just about words, it's about capturing the essence of the story in a way that resonates with the target audience. Now, here's the issue. A lot of this is basically saying that we need to restructure things in order to allow these Western consumers to understand what's happening and to consume it properly. However, a lot of customers and a lot of people from the West, they want something very simple. A very honest translation, as close to the original intent as possible in any context. They want it as close to the original message as utterly possible. And here's the thing, sometimes things get difficult. Sometimes there are Japanese phrases and terms that really have no equivalent in other languages like English. However, that doesn't mean you should have to restructure them. Just leave that phrase in and then do something that for some reason localizers are terrified of. And that's providing a translator's note. When you see some phrase, term, holiday, what have you, that is something that is really Japanese and maybe people from other languages wouldn't understand, keep that original phrase and then add a translator's note and let people understand and learn what this different thing is instead of censoring or altering or trying to make it into something else. Let people learn about a different culture. Is that so scary to these translators and localizers? Literally, allow people to learn things through translators' notes. I think they're excellent. I like to learn about certain things through notes like that. I think it's very helpful. And for some reason, localizers are petrified of using this very valuable tool in their translations. But moving forward, you knew you would see sections like this. Cultural sensitivity in characters. Character design and development must be culturally sensitive. No. What may be acceptable in one culture might be offensive in another. Too bad. Localizers play a crucial role in ensuring that characters are relatable and respectful, avoiding stereotypes or other references that could be perceived as negative in specific cultures. Skill issue. Basically, I don't understand bending over backwards to basically appease a bunch of weirdos on Twitter who are never going to consume your products in the first place. So this idea right here of designs and development must be culturally sensitive. Culturally sensitive to who? Well, probably to very sensitive people. That's the issue. Because then we end up with situations like this where we're getting heavy censorship of anything that looks like fan service. Forget fan service. That is definitely way too offensive for a lot of the people that they're trying to appease in the Western market. And it's something that gamers are fed up with. They're tired of this process of over-the-top censorship of anything that looks like an attractive character design or fan service. And we also have seen the lengths at which localizers will project their own belief systems into their localizations. Only a few weeks ago, we covered this big situation coming out of the lovely, complex English dub, where basically there was this whole disaster where the localizer in charge of it openly admitted that he doesn't like the anime he was working on. He said that it was bad and had a lot of problematic themes and characters, and it was his job to basically save it. So he changed a great deal of the characters, the dialogue, the story, what have you. Even removing a self-insert from the original creator of the series because they didn't find it appropriate. Absolutely insane narcissistic stuff, but that's what's going on. So that person is the arbiter of what is appropriate for these markets. I don't trust these people. I don't think you should either. These localizers have their own sense of what they think is appropriate and not appropriate. And oftentimes, those views are greatly different than the potential customers of these games. And that's the problem here. So we're supposed to sit back and just trust these localizers to understand the nuances of these differing cultural values when really nobody wants them to be doing that. If localizers just went poof, right, in these mediums, I don't think people would even notice. In fact, things would probably get better, but nobody is dying for localizations, okay? People want honest translations before anything else. But continuing on, we have this section about inclusive language and representation. Boy, howdy, this will be good. Localization efforts extend to promoting inclusivity through language and representation. This involves adapting not only the linguistic aspects, but also addressing gender-specific language, cultural norms, and diverse perspectives. The aim is to create an immersive experience where players from different backgrounds can identify with the characters and narrative. This can be very challenging for certain languages due to grammar. Again, similar to one of the first sections we read, I don't need to relate or identify with characters. Personally, I just like the character. You know, the ultimate example people give is Goku from Dragon Ball, okay? People from cultures all around the world love Goku, despite the fact many of them look completely different than what Goku does. But it doesn't matter because they like his character. They relate to the character, not the identity of the character. And this has been a very big issue. And also similar to this last section we just talked about, when it comes to inclusive roles and representation, that is in the eyes of the localizers, not what the customers actually want. Because when there is very valid forms of representation, we've seen disasters. So we had this manga series, if you remember, there was a big controversy where the main character, who is a cross-dressing male character, was rewritten by localizers to be a trans character because they believed that was a more fair and meaningful representation of this character, which was absolutely ridiculous and eventually would result in these chapters being recalled and fixed. And it's unbelievable because of people like Katrina and these other people who were working with Seven Seas, you know, saying, oh, I guess a gay cross-dressing male character is not diverse enough. We have to go to the next step and make this character trans. It's very weird. You are denying the identity of a gay cross-dressing character, and apparently that's just not enough representation. And people who were actually enjoying this character and what he represented were upset about this because people in the localization scene wanted to virtue signal and get some brownie points on Twitter by rewriting this character to be trans. It was absolutely disgusting stuff, by the way. But continuing on, here's some other examples people have been picking up from the addressing gender-specific language, where we have examples like here saying, just stand tall, you're a boy, aren't you? To be translated into, just take a few deep breaths. And even notice they changed the name of the dog, dude. They changed it from Bochi to Rover. Is that necessary? Is that really valuable? Is that adding something to this translation? I don't think so. But anyways, moving on to the next section. Adapting humor and wit. Oh boy. Humor often relies on cultural references and wordplay, making it a challenging aspect of game localization. Translators must carefully navigate puns, jokes, and cultural references to maintain the intended comedic effect. This requires a deep understanding of the target audience's sense of humor while staying true to the original wit. Ah, yes, the target audience's sense of humor. Unfortunately for places like Capcom and their localization team, they have the wrong target in mind. They're not targeting customers, they are targeting a bunch of spurgs on Twitter who want Gen Z humor and goofy chungus-wungus language in their localizations. I mean, this is what we end up with. You have the honest translator versus the localizer, and the localizer adding in things like incel and weeb and sus and all these things, where it often seems like, one, they're forcing in this Gen Z language, but they're also doing these weird translations where they're now seemingly insulting the viewer and the consumer, which is always odd. And it makes sense when we think about some of the localizers we've talked about who seemingly hate the medium and hate the customers of the medium that they're working in. So it's not surprising that they take liberty with their localizations to insult the customer. It happens all the time where they're calling the customer through inaccurate translations things like incel, pedophile, weeb, all these things. It's very, very weird. But moving on, this is the last section right here. Consistency in terminology. Maintaining consistency in terminology is crucial for a smooth and coherent gaming experience. This applies not only to translating words, but also to ensuring that game mechanics, instructions, and lore are consistently represented across languages. Establishing a cohesive language system helps prevent confusion and enhances the overall gaming experience for players worldwide. Now, I think this is very contradictory to a lot of things they've been saying in this thread, because if you want consistency in terminology, you can't really have that when you're changing your translations based on the cultural sensitivities of where that particular localization is going. So if a certain phrase, term, story, character, whatever is offensive to one country but not the other, you're going to end up with inconsistencies within those stories. And that goes against everything they're trying to say right here. But moving on, this is the good part of all this. People are crapping all over this thread. I have no idea why they wasted their time on this. And you can see this is when things are getting good. When the original post is getting roasted in multiple languages. That's when you know you really messed up on Twitter. You can see some of the replies here. I'll read a few of them. This one saying, why do you think other people can't handle cultures or go look up nuanced words, phrases, customs, and foods? Why do you think others can't handle something different? That's something we touched upon earlier in the video. What is so damaging and concerning and problematic about Japanese culture? It's very weird. These localizers are quite odd in the message that they're trying to send to their potential customers. Here's another one saying, make your game for the non-existent modern audience and you'll receive their non-existent money. There's very likely going to come a time in the near future even when you wish you would have deleted this post quickly. Way too late now. It's so easy not to play your games. I mean, yeah, they're doing everything in their power to make you not want to play their games. They're making it too easy. Here's another round saying, I will never buy another Capcom game as long as this woke mission statement is how Capcom USA does business. Shame, OG Mega Man /X is one of my favorite all time. Crapcom is back to their crappy ways. Enjoy bankruptcy because I ain't coming back. Stop destroying games with this garbage. AAA companies will not learn until they are close to failing financially. People just want translation, not localization. Just use AI. They don't have bias if programmed in at the outset. So a lot of people are fighting back against this and saying they have an issue with this. And ultimately, like what they said down here, these companies just will not learn. And it's strange because we know these are companies trying to make a profit. They're doing everything in their power to try to min-max their revenue. And yet they're doing stuff like this that is backfiring. We're seeing it with the releases of recent AAA titles like Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, using the kind of things that people hate, live service, transactions in game, things like that. And people are upset about it and the sales are reflecting it. It's a huge bomb. And yet we've seen companies look at that and say, well, you know what, we're still going to go with it. It makes no sense. And with these localizations, the same thing is happening. These localizations are causing people to abandon products and companies, and they just keep doing it. Who is telling and gaslighting these people into thinking these localization efforts are good for them? And overall, I can't imagine the amount of money that Capcom is wasting on initiatives like this. It's a complete waste of time, and they're still doing it. And the fact that they posted this onto social media is mind-boggling. Keep this on your website. This seems like something that you would, sneak onto your website to make some of the investors happy or the ESG, whatever you want. But to put this on Twitter, knowing the kind of perspective people have on these localizations, totally tone deaf. If I were the actual people at Capcom in Japan, I would be furious that they made this post or convinced you that this post was a good idea because it reflects horribly, not just on this localization team, but on Capcom as a whole and all of the products that they are attempting to sell to these potential customers that might be lost. But anyways, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was a little bit of a long one, so thanks for hanging in there with me. And as always, feel free to share your thoughts about today's topics in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys next time.